Wow, I'm very surprised. K-Dog's movie review. The first Omen is directed by Arkasha Stevenson and stars Nell Tiger Free, who plays a young American woman that is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, but encounters a darkness that causes her to question her faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring about the birth of evil incarnate. I guess since this is a prequel to the original film from 1976, I'll say my quick thoughts on that. It's pretty good. I will say, though, that some of the scares are a little unintentionally funny to watch now. But the atmosphere is great, the kid is spooky, and the music is awesome. It even won an Oscar. I've heard the rest of the movies in the franchise get sort of progressively worse as they go, so I've never seen them. So having said that, I really had low expectations for this movie. I hadn't watched a single trailer. I just assumed it was an easy cash grab from 20th Century Studios, that they could make this movie for cheap and solely bank on the Omen name alone. But holy shit, was I wrong. This movie is infinitely better than I thought it was going to be. It far exceeded my expectations. It's actually spooky. It actually has dread. It actually has great acting and spooky atmosphere. The music is top notch. The sound design is on point. The story is we'll get into that. But oh my God, as a soft reboot, prequel, whatever you want to call it, for a movie that came out over 40 years ago, this is pretty damn good. Again, it's not perfect, and we'll get into that a little later, but this is a pretty damn good movie. I'm pretty sure this is the director's first full feature film, and you can tell that she is a horror fan. She is really putting a lot into the way the camera moves, the way the music swells during certain scenes. So let's get into it. The cinematography here is great. I'm not sure how much money they spent on this movie, but it looks pretty damn expensive. The way in which certain shots are framed look great. It really added to the spooky atmosphere that the filmmakers were going for. The way the camera swoops and sways over Rome, even intertwining with the music in an off-putting way, really harkens back to the original movie and some other movies during that time period. You can really tell that they were focused on making a movie that felt like it led into that first original Omen movie. The way in which shots are presented, the way in which the camera sort of dollies between different rooms seamlessly, the set design, the costumes, it's all on point here. The acting here is great too. Free does a phenomenal job here as well, trying to uphold her faith while slowly discovering all of these horrific things that the church that she has pledged her entire life to is a part of. There are a lot of scenes in this movie, a few in particular that I'll get into in spoilers, where she has to put on a lot of physicality, and it really shows how much dedication she has, because it comes off as scary as fuck. I was fully invested during some of the scenes in this movie. I think I'm just honestly so shocked, because I completely was ready to rip on this movie. I thought it was going to be dog shit, and I was just so pleasantly surprised that within the first 5 minutes of seeing this movie, I was like, wait, is this a good movie? What I love about this movie is the camera is not afraid to just linger on a specific character or a specific shot and just let the audience bask in the horror of what's happening. The music is also great too. Maybe not as good as the original Omen, maybe not Oscar worthy. It does a lot of that choir-esque type music, which always works for me at least. I fucking love the music in this movie. I thought it was great. At times, it gets a little too bombastic, which I'll get into a little later, but overall, it was phenomenal. The sound design, too, really enhances certain horrific scenes. My God, I'll get into it in spoilers, but certain tiny sounds that occur during these silent scenes absolutely work for me. The horror is fantastic when the music swells just enough, but also when it goes away and it's just silence. One of my greatest critiques of modern horror movies is that they feel the need to include bombastic boom music during any horrific scene. But this movie, at a lot of times, isn't afraid to just let the audience experience what is happening without score. That does kind of lead into one of the negatives about the film for me, though. It has its own idea, and the directing here is great, but sometimes modern horror just kind of creeps into the movie. We're watching a scene that's horrific on its own, but all of a sudden our ears are flooded with this loud, banging music. I don't need a movie to tell me when something is scary. The other main problem I had with this movie is the writing. It's not bad, but it's not great either. I mean, this is pretty hard given that it's a sequel. We ultimately know what's going to happen, but they didn't really make it terribly special in any way. And the ending, while done well, is pretty predictable. So it was a weird feeling for me as I was watching this because I was enjoying scenes and pretty much everything I was watching, but as a whole, I wasn't terribly invested in the story about what was going to happen. I was invested in how the filmmakers were going to present it, and they do it in very horrific and kick-ass ways, but the story itself just left a lot to be desired. I also fully believe that this movie should have ended 5 to 10 minutes early. I'll get to it in spoilers about where I think the movie should have ended exactly, but the tail end of it to me just felt kind of cringy. Another thing about the writing of this movie was that there's a lot of exposition thrown at us. Certain characters, like a lot of modern horror movies, solely exist to give our main heroes exposition. And so it just felt a little weird within this really well-directed movie. So overall, I think I loved this movie. You can really tell that there was actual passion put into this movie behind someone who appreciates horror. I was not looking forward to this at all, but oh my God, was I left so surprised with how much I actually enjoyed this movie. It was great, and I would fully recommend you going into a theater to see it. Spoiler warning, you've been warned. So it's found out later in the movie that our main character, Margaret, is in fact the one who is to give birth to the Antichrist. She's the one who's been impregnated by the jackal that the church is apparently keeping somewhere in some building. They sort of throw this other creepy little girl, Carlita, as the red herring. We're meant to believe that she's the one, but I didn't really love the way that they carried out the sequence of events. It was shown that Margaret was drugged in some way and raped by the jackal. It just felt a little strange because the church has been working for years and years on birthing this woman who would then birth the Antichrist, but they allow her to have her own apartment and go out clubbing. Why not just lock her in a room and do it that way? I mean, I get why it doesn't work in a movie sense. The whole point of a movie is we're supposed to discover things as time goes on. It just didn't really make sense to me with how they treated her as a character up until the point of her actually giving birth to the Antichrist. But like I said, phenomenal physical performance from Free. My God, the way that she contorts her body and starts huffing after the horrific car crash, when this baby starts growing inside of her rapidly. It was so horrific. It reminded me of the movie Possession with Sam Neill. It felt so raw and real, and the camera was not afraid to just linger on this actress as she continued to convulse and convulse. It was so well done. I think in any other modern horror movie, it would have stopped after about 5 seconds, but we lingered on that actress for about 30 seconds, a minute. It felt like a long time. But oh my God, the scene that scared me the most was the actual birthing of the child. The way in which gore is done in this scene is so well executed. They slice her stomach open, and we see that. It quickly cuts away because it's not a gore fest, but it is meant to show just how horrific it is when we start to hear the little tools and everything is silent and we're just panning across the rest of the evil church doers just watching this unfold. And we hear in the background the tiny instruments working their way inside of her and getting this baby out. But what really got to me was Margaret just subtly wincing and saying, "Please help me, I'm in pain." Hearing that while silently listening to these tools operate on her and just panning across and looking at these deadpan priests and nuns just watch was so horrific. It felt like that was a scene that in any other modern horror they would add this bombastic loud music to and would cut away from it fastly and just quickly show the baby. But no, here we linger and we linger, and it takes a while, and it's so horrific. But where I think the movie should have ended was right after that. Maybe we just hear the sound of Damien or both twins because they're birthed as twins in this movie. Maybe we just hear the sound of them crying and then we cut to black. But in here, the movie keeps going for another 5 to 10 minutes. She escapes, and then things sort of start to get into modern horror a little bit. Everything is done over the top. The whole place is burned to the ground, and we see the CGI jackal screaming and burning. I really didn't think we needed that. I think the horrific hand images we got and the black silhouette creature overlooking this poor woman as she's being raped was enough for our audience. But the movie just felt so modern in the sense that it had to show that creature dying. That we don't really need to see that. But then the movie goes even further in showing us X number of years later. It felt so Marvel-esque. We're pictured with Carlita, Margaret, and the baby girl sitting around a table, living in the middle of the country somewhere, I assume, when they're approached by the priest that originally helped them. She comes out with a shotgun saying, "Get out of here." It just felt like it became a different movie at that point. I know it's the very end, but still, it felt like a Jason Bourne movie or something. This character just wanting to live on their own on a ranch with a gun in the middle of nowhere. And to make it even worse, they have our exposition priest say, "And they've named him Damien." And then the music swells. It felt like we're seeing Thor's hammer at the end of Iron Man, or we're seeing Thanos at the end of Infinity War say, "I'll do it myself." It felt so Marvel-esque. We didn't need any of that. So much horror is in this movie already. I was already intensely feeling the dread of everything that was occurring. But when that epilogue scene happened and we got the Damien reveal, it just felt really cringy and stupid. It honestly felt like that was sort of a studio note at the end of it. Oh, you got to include the name Damien. But overall, like I said before, I really liked this movie. I thought so much of it was well executed. The writing could have used a lot of work, but if you make something spooky enough, you don't really care. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What's your favorite Omen movie within the Omen franchise? Till next time.